She was kicked out for getting pregnant until the Mafia boss took her in. Alone in the pouring rain with nowhere to go, a desperate young woman seeks out the father of her unborn child. But instead of finding him, she comes face to face with his older brother, the most feared crime lord in the city. "My brother is dead," he tells her coldly. "And if his enemies find out you're carrying his child, you'll be next." Forced into his heavily guarded mansion, she witnesses firsthand the violence that surrounds him. Yet as danger closes in from all sides, she discovers the ruthless man who terrifies everyone else shows a different side to her alone. Just as they begin to trust each other, the FBI storms in with shocking revelations about her family's dark past, and everyone's true loyalties are called into question. When the truth finally emerges, blood will spill. But whose? Is this unexpected pregnancy the beginning of a love story, or the catalyst for an all-out mob war that will destroy everything in its path? Through the rain-streaked darkness, Sophia stared at her childhood home until every light went dark. Water dripped from her hair, mixing with the tears she couldn't hold back anymore. The suitcase handle felt cold and unfamiliar in her trembling grip. Hastily packed with whatever she could grab before Antonio led her to the door. "Putana!" Her father's voice echoed in her mind, each syllable a fresh wound. The word felt like poison, destroying 25 years of being his perfect daughter in an instant. She wrapped her free arm around her still flat stomach, trying to protect the tiny life that had cost her everything. Thunder rumbled overhead as memories of that night with Marco flooded back. The way his dark eyes had caught hers across the glittering charity gala, how he'd made her laugh as they shared whispered conversations between her coordination duties. The electricity when their fingers brushed while exchanging his business card, the passion that had consumed them both in his hotel room. A car splashed past, jolting Sophia back to reality. She was soaked through, standing alone on a dimly lit street with nowhere to go. Her small apartment's rent was due next week, and without her family's support, she dug through her purse with shaking fingers, finding Marco's slightly bent business card. The elegant script announced Marco Russo, Vice President of Operations, with a Manhattan office address. She'd called twice after that night, but his number went straight to voicemail. Now, knowing she carried his child, she had no choice but to try again. Sophia's teeth chattered as she made her way to the subway station, dragging her suitcase down the wet steps. The fluorescent lights felt harsh after the soft darkness outside. She sank onto a metal bench, ignoring the concerned glances from other passengers. The last train to Manhattan would leave in 20 minutes. The rhythmic sway of the subway car usually calmed her, but tonight it only amplified her nausea. She pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching her reflection ghost over the dark tunnels. The girl looking back seemed like a stranger. Pale, mascara smeared, hair plastered to her face. Nothing like the polished event coordinator who'd caught Marco's eyes 6 weeks ago. Her hand drifted to her stomach again. "I'll figure this out," she whispered, too softly for anyone else to hear. "I promise." The luxury hotel where she'd met Marco loomed ahead as she emerged from the subway. Its golden lights pierced the rainy darkness, a beacon of that one perfect night. She'd coordinated dozens of events there, but now the doorman didn't recognize her bedraggled figure. His polite but suspicious gaze followed as she hurried past. In the marble lobby bathroom, Sophia tried to make herself presentable. She wrung out her hair, blotted her running makeup, and smoothed her wrinkled clothes. The woman in the mirror looked marginally better, but her eyes held a desperation she couldn't hide. Her phone showed 11:42 p.m. when she approached the front desk. "Excuse me," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I need to leave a message for Marco Russo." The clerk's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Russo is no longer a guest with us." "Please," Sophia pressed. "It's important. Could you check if he has any standing reservations?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss guest information." The clerk's tone was final. "If you have business with Mr. Russo, I suggest contacting his office during regular hours." Sophia's shoulders slumped. She'd known it was a long shot, but each dead end felt like another door slamming in her face. She retrieved her suitcase from where she'd hidden it behind a potted palm and walked back into the rain. The next hour passed in a blur of wet streets and increasing exhaustion. She found herself in a small 24-hour diner, nursing a cup of tea she could barely afford. The elderly waitress kept refilling it without charging, throwing concerned glances at Sophia's suitcase and damp clothes. Around 1 a.m., Sophia finally forced herself to face reality. She had enough savings for maybe 2 months' rent if she was extremely careful. Her event coordination job paid well, but not enough for a baby in Manhattan. And now, without her family's support, she pulled out her phone, opening her contacts. Friends scrolled past, mostly work acquaintances who wouldn't appreciate a midnight call asking for shelter. Her finger hovered over her brother Antonio's number. He'd seemed sympathetic while leading her out, but he'd still closed the door. The tea had gone cold. Outside, the rain continued falling, washing away the last traces of her old life. In 12 hours, she'd gone from nervous but excited about her pregnancy to completely alone, the weight of it pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. "More tea, honey." The waitress appeared with a steaming pot. Sophia managed a weak smile. "No, thank you. I should go." "You sure you got somewhere to go?" The woman's lined face showed genuine concern. "Yes," Sophia lied, standing up. She left her last $5 as a tip, knowing the waitress had probably seen right through her. Back on the street, she pulled Marco's business card out once more. "Tomorrow. No, today," she corrected herself, seeing it was past midnight. She would go to his office. She would wait all day if necessary. He deserved to know about the baby, and she deserved answers about why he'd disappeared. For now, though, she needed to find somewhere to sleep. Most hotels were far beyond her budget, but she remembered a small hostel near Central Park that catered to budget travelers. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it would be dry. Sophia gripped her suitcase handle tighter and started walking. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighted down by wet clothes and exhaustion. But she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, while her free hand remained curved protectively over her stomach. Whatever came next, she wasn't just making decisions for herself anymore. The harsh morning light filtered through thin curtains, making Sophia wince as she opened her eyes. The motel room smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap air freshener, a far cry from her cozy apartment. Her phone showed 7:42 a.m. She'd barely slept 4 hours since checking in. Sitting up on the lumpy mattress, she counted the remaining cash from her emergency stash. The room had cost more than expected, leaving her with just $37. Her credit card was nearly maxed out from recent car repairs, and her next paycheck wouldn't arrive for 2 weeks. "One step at a time," she muttered, forcing herself to shower in the tiny bathroom with its suspicious rust stains and flickering light. The water pressure was weak, but at least it was hot. She put on yesterday's clothes, still slightly damp from the rain, and tried to make herself presentable. The business card was creased now, softened from being handled so many times. "Marco Russo, investment consultant," it read, with an address in the financial district. She'd memorized every detail during those weeks of waiting for his call. The bus ride across town took nearly an hour. Sophia pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching the city transform from the gritty edges of her temporary neighborhood to the gleaming towers of Manhattan. Her stomach growled. She'd skipped breakfast to save money, but the nausea that had plagued her for weeks seemed mercifully absent today. Hope began to fade as the bus approached her stop. This didn't look like the financial district she knew from coordinating corporate events. The streets grew narrower, buildings more industrial. When she found the address, her heart sank. The warehouse stretched an entire block, its windows boarded up or broken. Graffiti covered the brick walls in overlapping layers, some so old they'd faded to pale ghosts of color. A chain-link fence, partially collapsed, surrounded the property. "No," Sophia whispered, double-checking the address. "This can't be right." "Looking for something, miss?" A man emerged from between two dumpsters, pushing a shopping cart filled with bottles and cans. His beard was gray and matted, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "This address, has there been a business here recently, an investment firm?" The man shook his head. "Nothing but rats and pigeons for years. Used to be a printing company before that went belly up in '08. Sophia's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. The battery was at 42%. She hadn't brought her charger in her hasty packing. She opened Google, searching Marco Russo investment consultant and variations thereof. Nothing relevant appeared except photos from the charity gala where they'd met. There he was, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, champagne glass raised in a toast. The caption listed him among other donors, but provided no additional information. She clicked through dozens of social media posts from that night, finding only the same vague mentions. Hours passed as she wandered the neighborhood, trying different search combinations and making calls that led nowhere. The business registry had no record of his company. The hotel where they'd spent the night wouldn't confirm if he'd been a guest. It was as if Marco Russo had simply evaporated after their night together, leaving nothing but memories and the growing life inside her. As afternoon faded into evening, exhaustion and hunger finally overcame her determination. She'd walked miles, her feet aching in shoes meant for office work. The temperature was dropping, and her still damp coat provided little warmth. The neon sign of Bella Notte drew her like a beacon. The small cafe occupied the corner of a narrow street in Little Italy, its windows steamy and inviting. The aroma of garlic and tomatoes reminded her painfully of home, of Sunday dinners she'd never attend again. A bell tinkled as she entered. The cafe was nearly empty, too late for lunch, too early for dinner. An elderly woman behind the counter smiled warmly as Sophia approached. "What can I get you, Cara?" Sophia checked the prices on the chalkboard menu. "Just the minestrone, please, and some bread." The woman nodded, disappearing into the kitchen. Sophia chose a small table near the radiator, trying to absorb its warmth. She spread her phone, the business card, and her notebook on the scratched wooden surface, searching again for any clue she might have missed. The soup arrived steaming, thick with vegetables and pasta. The bread was crusty and fresh, served with a small dish of olive oil she hadn't ordered. Sophia ate slowly, making it last, while watching darkness gather outside the windows. She was so focused on her meal that she didn't notice the change in atmosphere at first. The bell chimed several times in quick succession. Male voices spoke in low tones. Chairs scraped against the floor as other customers hastily departed. It wasn't until a shadow fell across her table that Sophia looked up. Her spoon clattered against the bowl as she froze, caught in the dark gaze of a man who could have been Marco's older brother. The same sharp cheekbones, the same thick black hair. But where Marco's eyes had held warmth and charm, this man's were cold and assessing. "You're the woman who was with my brother Marco." The shadow fell across Sophia's table like a physical weight. She looked up, her spoon frozen halfway to her mouth, into a face that made her heart stop. For a split second, she thought it was Marco. The same dark hair, the same sculpted features. But no. This man's eyes were obsidian hard, devoid of the warmth that had drawn her to his brother. Without invitation, he slid into the chair across from her. His expensive suit whispered against the worn leather seat. Two men in dark clothes positioned themselves near the door, while another spoke quietly to the elderly woman, who quickly disappeared into the kitchen. "I'm Dante Russo," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the small space. "Marco's older brother." Sophia's hands trembled as she set down her spoon. "You know where Marco is. I've been trying to—" "Marco is dead." The words fell like stones into still water. "Killed 4 days ago." The world tilted sideways. Sophia gripped the edge of the table, bile rising in her throat. "No," she whispered. "That's not—" "How?" "Shot outside his apartment." Dante's expression darkened, a muscle ticking in his jaw. 3 times in the chest. Very professional." Tears blurred Sophia's vision. She remembered Marco's smile, the gentle way he'd touched her face, his promises of calling her. Now she understood why he never had. Dante studied her with predatory intensity as tears slipped down her cheeks. "My brother was more than the charming businessman you met at that gala. He was part of our family enterprise. The Russo family has controlled the north side of the city for 3 generations. What kind of business?" Sophia asked, though part of her already knew the answer. A cold laugh escaped him. "Everything that matters. Protection, shipping, construction, the kind of business that makes enemies." He leaned forward, his presence filling her world. "My men have been tracking Marco's movements, anyone he contacted in his final days. Your name appeared in his calendar 6 weeks ago." Sophia's hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach. The movement caught Dante's attention, his dark eyes narrowing. "Is there something you need to tell me?" She swallowed hard. There was no point hiding it. Soon enough, it would be obvious. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "It's Marco's." The change in Dante was instant and electric. He went absolutely still, like a predator spotting prey, then pulled out a phone and barked rapid Italian into it. Sophia caught words like importante and subito, but little else. "You're coming with me," he announced, sliding the phone away. "Now." "What? No, I can't." "The Costello family killed my brother," Dante cut her off. "If they learn you're carrying a Russo heir, they'll kill you too." He stood, towering over her. "This isn't a request. It's your only chance to survive." Sophia's mind raced. The Costellos, Marco, murder, a baby. It was too much, too fast. "My job," she protested weakly. "My apartment." "Will be handled," Dante signaled to his men. One collected her phone and notebook while another gathered her coat. "Everything you need will be provided." The elderly woman reappeared with a paper bag. "For later," she said softly, pressing it into Sophia's hands. There was sympathy in her eyes. and something else. Knowledge, perhaps, of what was coming. Sophia found herself guided toward the door, Dante's hand at her elbow. His touch wasn't rough, but it brooked no argument. Outside, a black SUV idled at the curb, its windows tinted to mirror darkness. The evening had grown colder, and she shivered in her thin blazer. "Give her your jacket," Dante ordered one of his men, who immediately shrugged out of his wool coat and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was surprisingly gentle, at odds with the gravity of the situation. The city lights blurred through her tears as Dante opened the car door. She hesitated, one foot on the running board. "My family. The ones who threw you out last night?" His words struck home, making her flinch. "You have new family now." He gestured for her to get in, his expression softening fractionally. "The baby changes everything, Sophia. You're under my protection now." She climbed into the SUV, the leather seats soft and warm against her back. Dante slid in beside her, his presence filling the space with unspoken authority. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, Sophia clutched the paper bag from the cafe owner, its warmth the only familiar thing in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. The streets of Little Italy gave way to wider avenues, taking her toward an unknown future. In the space of 24 hours, she'd lost her family, discovered Marco's death, and learned she was carrying the heir to a criminal empire. Sophia pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching her old life disappear into the gathering darkness. Beside her, Dante spoke quietly in Italian to someone on his phone. Though she couldn't understand the words, the tone was clear, orders being given, arrangements being made. She thought of Marco, of his charming smile and gentle hands, wondering how much of what she'd known about him was real. Had any of it been true? Or had she simply been another move in some complex game she hadn't known she was playing? The baby shifted inside her, too small yet for anyone else to feel, but real to her. A reminder that whatever game this was, she was playing for two now. She glanced at Dante's reflection in the window, his hard profile, the set of his jaw, the way his hand rested near a bulge in his jacket that could only be a weapon. This man was nothing like his brother, yet he was now her only protection, her only chance at survival. The SUV passed through wrought iron gates, winding up a long driveway lined with perfectly manicured hedges. Sophia pressed her face closer to the window, taking in the sprawling estate that emerged from the darkness. Floodlights illuminated the grounds, revealing armed men patrolling in regular patterns, their weapons visible against tactical gear. The mansion itself was a study in contrast, classic Italian architecture merged with modern security features. Cameras tracked their approach, while ornate stone fountains bubbled peacefully in the circular drive. The SUV came to a stop at the base of wide marble steps. "Welcome to your new home," Dante said, his deep voice breaking the silence that had lasted the entire drive. Inside, the foyer soared 2 stories high, a crystal chandelier casting rainbow shadows across marble floors. But Sophia's eyes caught the subtle details. Reinforced windows, keypads discreetly mounted near doors, men with earpieces positioned at strategic points. "This way." Dante guided her through corridors decorated with Renaissance art and ancient weapons mounted in elaborate displays. The mix of beauty and brutality made her head spin. They entered what appeared to be a study, where an elderly man sat behind an antique desk. He stood as they entered, his movements deliberate and precise. "Giuseppe," Dante said, "this is Sophia Moretti. She's carrying Marco's child." Giuseppe's sharp eyes assessed her from head to toe. His expression remained neutral, but disapproval radiated from his rigid posture. "The timing is unfortunate," he said carefully. "She stays under our protection," Dante replied, his tone brooking no argument. "Have Maria prepare the blue suite." He turned to Sophia. "You'll join us for dinner first." The formal dining room continued the theme of old-world luxury, hand-painted frescoes on the ceiling, heavy silver place settings that probably predated her grandparents. Sophia sat stiffly in a high-backed chair while servants brought course after course she barely touched. "You need to eat," Dante said, watching her push pasta around her plate. "For the baby." The mention of her condition made Giuseppe's fork pause halfway to his mouth. "Perhaps, Don Russo, we should discuss the situation?" "The situation," Dante said, setting down his wineglass, "is that my brother was murdered." His voice remained calm, but ice crept into his tone. The Costellos broke faith. Marco went to their territory for peaceful negotiations about the harbor expansion. Instead, they ambushed him. Sophia's hand trembled as she reached for her water. "Why would they do that?" "Power. Territory. the same things they've always wanted. Dante's jaw tightened. But they shouldn't have known the meeting location. Someone told them. You believe there's a traitor? Giuseppe asked sharply. I know there is. Dante turned his attention back to Sofia. Which is why you can't leave. The Costellos have eyes everywhere. If they learn about your pregnancy... I want no part of this, Sofia interrupted, pushing back from the table. Your family, your enemies, your wars, none of this is my world. But it is. Dante's voice was almost gentle. The moment Marco touched you, it became your world. That child you carry, it's the last of his bloodline. The Costellos would kill you both without hesitation. You can't keep me here against my will. I can. I will. He stood, towering over the table. But not against your will, to preserve it. Your life, your child's life, depends on my protection now. Giuseppe cleared his throat. The blue suite is ready, Don Russo. Dante nodded. I'll show her up. They climbed a curved staircase to the second floor, passing more armed men stationed at intervals. The blue suite proved to be larger than Sofia's entire apartment. A sitting room opened into a bedroom with an enormous 4-poster bed, all decorated in shades of azure and cream. Everything you need should be here, Dante said, gesturing to a walk-in closet already filled with clothing. If you require anything else, tell Maria. How long? Sofia asked, her voice small in the vast room. Until I'm certain you're safe. He paused at the door. Rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. After he left, Sofia explored her gilded cage. The bathroom was stocked with expensive toiletries, the closet filled with designer clothes in her size. A small refrigerator held bottled water and healthy snacks. Everything spoke of careful preparation and unlimited resources. She went to the bedroom door, half expecting it to be locked. The handle turned freely, but as she opened it, she heard movement in the hallway, guards taking up their positions. The message was clear. She could move about the suite, but she wasn't going anywhere else without an escort. Sofia sank onto the edge of the bed, its silk duvet cool against her palms. 6 weeks ago, she'd been an ordinary event coordinator, her biggest worry whether the flower arrangements would arrive on time. Now she was pregnant, alone, and caught in the middle of a Mafia war. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach, thinking of the tiny life growing there. Marco's child. A child that would never know its father, never see his gentle smile or hear his laugh. Instead, it would be born into this world of beauty and violence, of crystal chandeliers and armed guards, of ancient family feuds and modern betrayals. The bedside clock ticked steadily, marking time in this strange new reality. Outside her windows, guards patrolled the manicured grounds, their shadows moving through the security lights. Inside, the air conditioning hummed softly, stirring the silk curtains like ghost fingers. Sofia slipped off her shoes and curled up on top of the covers, still fully dressed. The bed was sinfully comfortable, but sleep felt impossible. Her mind kept spinning through the events of the past 24 hours. The pregnancy test, her family's rejection, discovering Marco's death, and now this golden prison under his brother's protection. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, rousing Sofia from a fitful sleep. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The silk sheets and massive 4-poster bed felt alien after her modest apartment. Reality crashed back as she remembered Marco's death, Dante's intervention, her new gilded prison. A soft knock preceded a middle-aged woman entering with a breakfast tray. Good morning, Miss Moretti. I'm Elena, and I'll be attending to your needs during your stay. Elena's warm smile and motherly demeanor provided unexpected comfort. She set the tray on a small table by the window, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the room. Don Russo requested you join him for breakfast on the terrace once you're dressed. I've laid out some options in the closet. Sofia found the closet filled with new designer clothing, all in her size. The tags were still attached. Everything purchased recently and specifically for her. She selected a simple sundress, noting how the loose fabric would accommodate her changing body in the months ahead. The main terrace overlooked manicured gardens, where armed guards patrolled discreet paths between flowering bushes. Dante stood at the railing, his dark suit immaculate, speaking rapidly in Italian on his phone. He ended the call as Sofia approached. Did you sleep well? He asked, pulling out a chair for her. As well as can be expected, given the circumstances. A servant appeared with fresh coffee and pastries. Dante waited until they were alone before speaking. I've arranged for Dr. Isabella Romano to examine you this afternoon. She's discreet and experienced. She's handled all our family's medical needs for years. I don't need. You do. His tone broke to no argument. That child is now the last of Marco's blood. Its health and safety are paramount. Sophia picked at a croissant, her appetite diminishing. And what happens after the baby is born? Before Dante could answer, his phone rang. The conversation was brief, but Sophia watched his expression darken with each word. His knuckles whitened around the phone. "Excuse me," he said tersely, standing. "Elena will show you around the permitted areas of the compound." "Stay within the designated spaces!" He strode away, already barking orders into his phone. Elena appeared moments later, her smile sympathetic. "Shall we begin the tour, Miss Moretti?" They walked through the main house first, a maze of old-world luxury and modern security. Elena pointed out the library, conservatory, and indoor pool, explaining which areas were accessible and which were strictly off-limits. "How long have you worked here?" Sophia asked as they passed through a sun-filled gallery. "Since Marco was a baby." Elena's expression softened. "I was his nanny after their mother died. Such a sweet child, always laughing, always kind, different from Dante, who had to become hard so young." "Different how?" Elena paused before a window overlooking the grounds. "Marco wasn't made for this life. Not really. He had his father's looks, but his mother's heart. Too gentle for the family business, but too loyal to leave it." She sighed. "Dante protected him as much as he could, took on the heaviest burdens himself." Their conversation was interrupted by shouting from a building near the garage. Elena's face paled. "We should return to the house." But Sophia was already moving toward the sound, drawn by a terrible curiosity. The building's door stood ajar, voices echoing from within. Despite Elena's urgent whispers, Sophia crept closer. Through the gap, she saw a stark room with concrete floors. A man sat bound to a chair, blood running from his nose, terror in his eyes. Dante stood over him, his white shirt spattered with red, a knife glinting in his hand. "Who are you reporting to?" Dante's voice was terrifyingly calm. "The Costellos? Or someone else?" "Please," the man sobbed. "I don't know anything." "Wrong answer." Dante pressed the knife against the man's throat. "You were seen meeting with Costello's people 3 times last week. The day before they killed my brother, you made a call from a burner phone. Who did you tell about the meeting?" Sophia couldn't suppress her gasp. Dante's head snapped up, his eyes meeting hers. The rage in his expression shifted to something unreadable, something that made her stomach clench. "Take her back to the house, Elena," he said coldly. "Now!" The older woman gripped Sophia's arm, pulling her away from the scene, but the image remained burned in her mind, the blood, the knife, the casual violence in Dante's hands, the same hands that had pulled out her chair at breakfast, that had gestured so elegantly as they spoke. Her legs felt weak as Elena guided her back through the manicured grounds. The gardens seemed different now, their beauty a thin veneer over something darker. Armed men continued their patrols, their weapons no longer seeming like mere precaution. "You shouldn't have seen that," Elena said softly as they reached the house. "Some parts of this world. It's better not to know." But Sophia had seen it, had seen the true face of the man who now controlled her life. Marco's brother, her child's uncle, the man who claimed he would protect them. She understood now what that protection meant, what it cost, what violence lay beneath his carefully controlled exterior. Her hand drifted to her stomach, to the innocent life growing there. A life that would be born into this world of beautiful gardens and concrete rooms, of morning pastries and afternoon interrogations. A world where violence wore custom suits and protection came with blood-stained hands. Elena squeezed her shoulder gently. "Come, let's get you something to drink. The doctor will be here soon." Her voice carried the weight of long experience, of years watching others come to terms with the reality of life in the Rousseau compound. The obstetrician's visit offered a welcome distraction from the morning's horrors. Dr. Reynolds was a petite woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, setting up her portable equipment in Sophia's suite while Elena waited outside. 7 weeks along, the doctor confirmed, smiling as she conducted the ultrasound. "Everything looks perfectly healthy. Would you like to hear the heartbeat?" Sophia nodded, tears forming as the rapid whoosh whoosh filled the room. Her baby, Marco's baby, was real and strong. As the doctor turned to pack her equipment, Sophia noticed her car keys sitting on the bedside table. Quick as a thought, she palmed them while helping gather the ultrasound supplies. The weight of the keys burned in her pocket as Dr. Reynolds bid her goodbye, promising to return in 2 weeks. Sophia spent the rest of the afternoon watching the compound's routines from her window. Guards changed shifts at regular intervals. Kitchen staff used a service entrance near the gardens. As darkness fell, she changed into dark clothing from her new wardrobe and waited. At 9 o'clock, the night shift began their rounds. Sophia slipped from her room, padding silently down the back stairs to the service entrance. Her heart thundered so loudly she feared the guards would hear it. But the door opened soundlessly, and she emerged into the cool night air. Dr. Reynolds' silver sedan sat in the visitor parking area. Sophia's hands shook as she unlocked it, sliding behind the wheel. The engine started with a quiet purr. She kept the headlights off as she navigated toward the main gate, hope rising with each yard gained. Suddenly, floodlights blazed. Guards shouted, moving to block her path. Sophia floored the accelerator, aiming for the narrowest gap between them. Then gunfire erupted, not from the guards, but from the trees beyond the wall. 3 black SUVs crashed through the gates, men in masks pouring out with automatic weapons. The guards returned fire as chaos erupted. Sophia swerved, trying to avoid the crossfire. The car spun out of control, slamming into a massive oak tree. Pain exploded through her head as it hit the steering wheel. Warm blood trickled down her temple. Through blurred vision, she saw masked figures approaching the car. Rough hands dragged her from the wreckage as she struggled weakly. "Got the girl," one man growled. "Costello wants her alive." A single gunshot cracked through the night. The man holding Sophia jerked, then collapsed. More shots followed in rapid succession, precise, deadly. Through the haze of semi-consciousness, she saw Dante moving like a shadow among the attackers. His gun barked 3 times, dropping 3 men with lethal accuracy. His security team engaged the remaining Costello soldiers. The firefight was brief but brutal. Sophia tried to crawl away, but her limbs wouldn't cooperate. Strong arms lifted her, and she found herself cradled against Dante's chest. His expensive shirt was soaked with blood, both his and others. A bullet had grazed his shoulder, but he seemed not to notice the wound. "You and that baby aren't going anywhere," he whispered fiercely as he carried her toward the house. "You're under my protection now, whether you want it or not." Sophia drifted in and out of awareness as Dante climbed the stairs. His steady heartbeat thrummed against her cheek, his arms gentle despite the steel in his voice. He placed her carefully on her bed while Elena called for the doctor. "Sir, you need medical attention," one of his men insisted. "Later," Dante growled, pulling a chair close to Sophia's bedside. "I'm not leaving her." Through the fog of approaching unconsciousness, Sophia studied his face. Blood spattered his cheeks and throat. His shoulder still bled freely. But his eyes never left her, dark with an emotion she couldn't name. Anger, certainly, but something else too. Something that made her wonder if his fierce protection stemmed from more than just family duty. Elena returned with Dr. Reynolds, who immediately began examining Sophia's head wound. "Mild concussion," she announced. "She'll need monitoring overnight." "I'll stay," Dante said, his tone brooking no argument. He finally allowed one of his men to clean and bandage his shoulder, but refused to move from his vigil. Sophia wanted to protest, to push away his suffocating protection. But darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw before consciousness fled was Dante's face, set in grim determination as he stood guard over her and the precious life she carried. The last connection to his murdered brother, the future of his family line, now bound to him by blood and violence and something deeper that neither of them dared name. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains as Sophia's eyes fluttered open. Her head throbbed dully, memories of the previous night's chaos flooding back. She turned carefully, finding Dante slumped in an armchair beside her bed. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, suit jacket discarded, shirt wrinkled and stained with dried blood. White bandages wrapped his shoulder where the bullet had grazed him. His eyes opened instantly at her movement, dark and alert, despite his obvious exhaustion. "How's your head?" "Sore," Sophia admitted, touching the bandage at her temple. "You stayed all night." "You needed monitoring for the concussion." His voice was clipped, professional. "And clearly you can't be trusted alone." Shame and defiance warred in her chest. "I had to try. And now you've seen exactly what I warned you about." Dante stood, wincing slightly. "The Costellos want any advantage they can get. You and that baby are leverage they'd kill for." Over the next 3 days, a new routine emerged. Elena brought breakfast to Sophia's room each morning, followed by Dr. Reynolds checking her head injury. Dante insisted she join him for lunch and dinner in the formal dining room, where he outlined his new rules between courses. "You have freedom within the compound," he explained over pasta one afternoon. "The gardens, library, pool, all yours, but security goes with you everywhere, no exceptions." "I'm not a prisoner," Sophia challenged. "No, you're family now." His tone softened fractionally. "Which means both protection and obligations, including following the nutrition plan Dr. Reynolds created for the pregnancy." Sophia found herself spending mornings in the library, afternoons watching Dante work from his home office. He moved seamlessly between roles, charming potential investors over video calls, and then terrifying subordinates who failed to meet expectations. His legitimate businesses spanned real estate, shipping, and construction. But there were other meetings, too, held in Italian with hard-faced men who never smiled. On the fourth day, she finally gathered her courage to ask directly about his illegal activities. They were alone in his office, Sophia curled in a leather armchair while Dante reviewed contracts. "Why do you want to know?" he asked, studying her over his reading glasses. "Because I'm carrying your family's heir. I should understand what that means." He was quiet for a long moment, then set aside his work. "The Russos have controlled the North Side for 3 generations. Protection, shipping routes, certain profitable arrangements. My grandfather built it, my father ruled through fear, and I've tried to modernize, shift more into legitimate business." Is that what Marco was doing when he died? Pain flickered across Dante's features. He was negotiating with the Costellos. Their territory borders ours. There's been blood between our families for decades, but Marco thought he could broker peace. His jaw clenched. Instead, they murdered him. As the week progressed, Sophia found herself drawn to these glimpses beneath Dante's controlled exterior. He was undeniably dangerous. She'd seen that firsthand. But there were layers of complexity she hadn't expected. She caught him being quietly kind to Elena, saw genuine grief when he spoke of Marco, witnessed the weight of responsibility he carried. Friday evening found them on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the gardens in gold. Dante poured 2 glasses of wine, then caught himself. "Sorry, you shouldn't." Dr. Reynolds said a small amount is fine occasionally, Sophia said. "Just a sip." He handed her the glass, their fingers brushing. The wine was rich and deep, like everything else in Dante's world. They sat in companionable silence until he surprised her with a question. "What did you do? Before all this?" "Event coordination," she said. "I organized that. Charity gala where I met Marco." "Did you enjoy it?" The genuine interest in his voice encouraged her to continue. "I loved it. Creating perfect moments for people. Making everything run smoothly behind the scenes. It was challenging, but satisfying." "You're good with details," Dante observed. "I've seen you studying the compound's routines." Sophia blushed. Hard to break the habit of analyzing logistics. It's a valuable skill. He turned to face her fully. "Tell me more about your life before Marco. Your family." She hesitated, pain squeezing her heart. "Not much to tell. Traditional Italian-American household. Dad works construction, Mom keeps house. My brother Antonio is taking over the family business. They haven't spoken to me since I told them about the baby." "Their loss," Dante said quietly. The simple words carried unexpected weight. "Sometimes I miss them so much it hurts," Sophia admitted. "But I can't regret this baby, even with everything that's happened." Dante's expression softened as he looked at her. Really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. Not as Marco's mistake or an obligation to protect, but as herself. The moment stretched between them, filled with something unnamed but powerful. A guard appeared at the terrace door, breaking the spell. "Sir, Giuseppe needs you in the study." Dante nodded, standing smoothly. He paused beside Sophia's chair. "Thank you for sharing that with me. Perhaps we could talk more tomorrow." "I'd like that," Sophia said softly, watching him disappear into the house. She remained on the terrace, sipping her wine and wondering at how quickly the world could change, how the man she'd feared days ago now made her feel oddly safe, how his rare moments of gentleness affected her more than his displays of power ever had. The gardens grew dark as stars appeared overhead. Elena appeared to escort her inside, but Sophia lingered a moment